You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, presented by Maria Menounos and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Welcome to Justice is Served. Among our topics today, the brutal gang rape story told by Rolling Stone magazine has unraveled. Is it shoddy journalism or an incredible liar? Also, we will discuss whether Floyd Mayweather is on the hook for murder, simply for telling his friend to leave a cheating wife. Also, Uber is in big trouble. California district attorneys have filed a lawsuit against the multi-billion-dollar ride-sharing company. Plus, Mark Wahlberg's accuser has forgiven him, and the question is whether the governor of Massachusetts will issue a pardon. And Cosby speaks on the sex scandal. Not Bill, but his wife, Camille. Welcome to Justice is Served. I'm Sara Azari, your host, a criminal defense attorney and legal analyst, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Chelsea Galicia, and a very, very special guest here with us in the studio, Nanette Harrison. Nanette, thank you so much for accepting my invitation last minute to make it here and join us in our last show of the year. Nanette is a decorated journalist of over 20 years. She has extensive experience in investigative journalism, producing television, and as a creative strategist for all types of media. She is also the co-founder of Miss Revolutionaries, a feminist social media political platform which reaches over 1 million people per week. I can't wait to check that out, Nanette. And could you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Absolutely. Well, Miss Revolutionaries is really primarily a social media organization that was founded by a group of a few people who 2 years ago got, women primarily, who got very active with the all of the laws that were coming out against women's reproductive rights state by state. And there was a big action that was planned for a specific day in April, founded sort of by a woman out of Michigan. And it all happened really right on Facebook, that everybody just kind of joined this group and everybody got completely active quickly. And we did this day, march and an activist type of thing. And I became, just by pure serendipity, the director of that for Los Angeles. And out of that, I met a lot of really wonderful people. And once that action was over, we decided that we wanted to just sort of go out on our own, because while we liked the idea of feminist rights and even reproductive rights, we all were very political and we wanted to really talk about a lot of other things. And so we launched Miss Revolutionaries, and we have a Twitter space and a Facebook space. And we actually do participate in on-the-ground activism from time to time also.
Sounds fascinating. And on Facebook, how do we find that? It's Miss Revolution.
It's Miss Revolutionaries.
Okay,
yeah.
And on Twitter as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
Make
great.
sure you find the community page, because we have a group page, but that's become not as active as our community page, which is our fan page. It's really active. It's very fun.
It sounds fantastic, and I look forward to checking it out. All right, ladies, let's get started.
Yeah.
Our case of the week. On November 19th, Rolling Stone magazine published a 9,000-word article spanning over 45 pages about a woman named Jackie. Of course, Jackie is a pseudonym for a woman whose identity we may or may not know, who was attending the University of Virginia and claims that sometime in September of 2012, she was gang raped by about 7 men who forced her to orally copulate them. Some of them apparently stood by and watched. And this took place on broken glass for the duration of 3 hours. She is very specific about the story. She talks about the date, the particular fraternity where it occurred. She talks about the type of event that the fraternity was hosting. And she also says that, this is where the story gets very sensational, that, after the incident, she runs into 3 of her friends, and they were completely cruel and indifferent. They didn't try to help her, and also part of the story is that she talks about 2 other women, also at the University of Virginia, who are gang raped at the same fraternity. And the problem is, facts are disproven, the story has unraveled, and Rolling Stone magazine has issued not one but two apologies about this. So, Nanette, you're the perfect person to enlighten us on this. Is this shoddy journalism, or is Jackie simply a big fat liar?
Well, you know,
She's a total liar.
I like the gray space in between those two questions, actually, because I don't really think it's either. I'm not sure that Jackie's a complete and total liar. There are friends who have been interviewed by CNN, aside from Washington Post's coverage, who stand by her story and stand by what she's told them. And then on the other side of it, the journalist who wrote the original article, Sabrina Erdely, I think is how she pronounces her name, is a decorated journalist. I mean, this is not a person who just graduated from college who's a blogger. This is a person who's been awarded multiple awards in very high level, you know, places for journalism.
Okay, but here, and I'm not being a true believer criminal defense attorney here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be as objective as possible. But she apparently runs into three of her friends right after this incident.
No, she called them, or she called one of them.
Well, there's also reports that she encounters these people who have come out and spoken, and they say, we did not see a single visible injury. How can possibly someone who is raped for 3 hours on broken glass not have any injuries on her body? So I have to say that as much as I do believe there are true victims with true stories and true facts, I think something definitely happened to her. I agree with you on that, but I don't believe that this is it. And I think that especially this thing about the injuries was really disturbing to me, because that's something you can't hide. You know, being on broken glass for 3 hours, I think it would be pretty gruesome, and there's no evidence of that. So I think that she's been unfortunately discredited in this article, and I'm going to let you continue, but enough where we can't really believe what she's saying here, but I do believe that something happened to her. But anyway, continue.
Well, you know, as a journalist myself, or as a storyteller myself, I mean, I would say that these kinds of stories are super tricky to do. You know, journalists are not lawyers, and we're also not law enforcement officials, okay? We don't go uncover all of the facts of a case. In fact, that hasn't been done by law enforcement. It's apparently being done now. Maybe those facts will come out in time, and we will find out that, you know, what he said and what she said, and then what she said and what he said are all actually fabricated. Because that's what happens in a story like this. What I've noticed about it, having read a lot of articles on both sides, it seems like there's really a very quick rush to protect the University of Virginia by a lot of journalists. And I'm not saying it's because they didn't go to school there.
Right.
But a lot of people really like to protect the status quo. They want to protect the institutions.
Right.
If you really look at the facts about what that journalist was trying to do, it wasn't just to reveal this horrible gang rape story. There was a lot of information in that article about serious problems going on, not only at that campus, but campuses throughout the country. And apparently, in other statistics that I've seen in other articles, 38 women last year alone made reports to the university that they had been raped or sexually assaulted. Out of those, only 9 were investigated. And out of those 9, only 4 took it all the way. And that's because it's really hard as a rape victim. I mean, so I take off my journalist hat and I put on my Miss Revolutionaries hat, the feminist hat. It's very difficult for women to talk about sexual assault. It really is.
Absolutely.
And they get nowhere because why? Because they are attacked.
Right. Or not believed.
Not believed and attacked from every side.
And I understand that. I think victims of molestation and rape and sexual abuse naturally are not consistent with facts. They can't recite a chronological, linear, account of what happened to them. But so I, even in my practice, I try to look at the quality of these discrepancies, not just that there are discrepancies. So here I'm looking at, what it is that she said that just doesn't match up. What is it that has been disproven? I'm okay with her not being correct on the date, or the particular fraternity. Maybe she just confused 2 fraternities, but she says it happened at it was like a dating party or something at a fraternity. And then, the injuries really bother me, that she is very clear about being injured and it's not seen on her body. And I do agree with you. I think victims of rape and sexual assault go through a lot. They are faced with this sort of with people who blame them, who think that it's their fault that they got raped, and also that they should not be believed. There's that issue. But also they go through so much, from the minute they report it. Once they have the guts to actually talk about it, they go through talking to the police, talking to investigators, repeating, going and getting a rape kit. And then, they're poked and prodded by everybody, including finally a defense attorney in court who's gonna, shred apart their credibility on the stand. So they already have to deal with a lot. And so here, my question is, what is the responsibility of Rolling Stone magazine in this? Because they're also not very credible, right?
Well, on the surface right now, at least, without further facts that are going to probably come forward eventually, we don't really know. I mean, I find there's just strange stuff that doesn't pass a smell test for me with this particular journalist. Mm-hmm. She is decorated. She has done very serious stories for Rolling Stone, even on the sexual assault situation in the U.S. military. Mm-hmm. So she knows what she's doing. So there's something that's unanswered here. I would like to hear from her. Apparently I wouldn't say she's gone into hiding, but she's sort of backed off, and nobody's really hearing her side of the story. I think that it isn't abnormal for a journalist to take one person's story and really sort of explore that and get a lot of background. It's the advantage of being a print journalist as opposed to a television journalist. On television, you need interviews because you have to have talking heads for your story. In newspapers and in magazines, you get a lot of background that isn't really cited specifically there within the article. And we don't really know who's on Sabrina's list. We don't know who she talked to. We don't know how many people she interviewed.
What about on that issue, the fact that at some point Rolling Stones makes a statement saying Sabrina tried to reach so-and-so and so-and-so and was unsuccessful, and so that's why we weren't able to present their story or their corroboration or lack thereof. But then they come back and say, oh, oops, no, sorry. She had an agreement with Jackie not to contact the assailants, and that's why they weren't contacted.
I think there might be a misunderstanding. She agreed not to contact the 7 men who she accused of doing this to her because she did recognize one of them from a class that she was in, or a discussion group, and then she obviously knew the one who led her to that room.
Okay, well, even so, that the 7 men, as a journalist, I mean, I'm not a journalist, but I think journalistic integrity requires the person to go out. In order to say this is the story, they got to present the whole story. And I feel like here, it's a story about Jackie by Jackie.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I think it's a good point, and it's a valid point. I mean, I think that it's hard to believe that a person, as I have said, of this caliber of journalistic quality would make such a blatant mistake as to not really attempt to try to get some other, even to try to interview, say, the president of the fraternity itself, or I was never in a fraternity or sorority, of course, but still there must be representatives who she could have talked to from the place itself.
But doesn't journalism sometimes show somebody's story, anybody's story? You can't even
yes.
There's just, you can't always talk to the other person. They're sometimes just presenting a story, and their job is to present it. And yes, they want to be presenting something that's true, but are they, if I ask you about your childhood and you tell me the story of your childhood and I put it out there, do I have to go check with your parents and your siblings to make sure that everything is correct? Or is this your experience that we're talking about? And is that
Yes,
all that's required
I
of a
think that's
journalist?
true. I think the reason why people are incensed in this particular case is because the accusations she's making are criminal. I mean, first of all, she's talking about criminal actions. And she's talking about criminal actions perpetrated by 6, 7, how many men were in that fraternity who are, it's an esteemed place to go to school. And being in a fraternity usually means that you are, typically of a certain elite background. So you are accusing people of doing something that's really, they should be in prison for. So maybe that probably in this particular case is some of it. But I have to say, I agree with you. I mean, usually telling a story is telling a story, and you shouldn't have to, recite everything. The sad thing to me is that in this whole situation, the debacle over how many girls are raped, 1 in 5 girls on college campuses will be raped in their tenure there. 1 in 5. Only 12% will report it. that means there's a lot of guys out there who are rapists who aren't in prison or have never haven't even been challenged for their acts. This is a serious threat for women.
And the article talked about that, or there's people talking about, we don't want this one story and a couple discrepancies to totally blow the credibility of everyone who has a story like this.
Right, because it discourages the victims who are already discouraged to come forward. But what about the 2 other women that Jackie refers to as also having been gang raped at this particular fraternity? How do you think this credibility issue that we have is going to affect, whether those women really were gang raped? I mean, the story comes from Jackie. Yeah. And so we have that issue of whether because now she's telling the truth about.
We've now discredited her.
Well,
so now everything
fully is if everything she says is not totally correct, is she completely discredited? Is it a black or white issue?
No.
Or can somebody be truthful
it's not really
totally
black and
accurate?
white. It's just that at this point, we know a lot of what she said does not check out. Okay, but we don't know to the contrary.
I heard a lot of that, but then I also don't know. So I don't know what are the clothes that she was wearing after she walked out, and when she met with these friends, I didn't see in the article where she met them. Was it a well-lit place that they could see everything, or she had a jacket on?
But 3 hours on broken glass? No.
I don't remember. I remember there being broken glass. I don't remember 3 hours on broken glass. I know some people are saying, well, the fraternity has said that they didn't have a party that night, and they checked it because there were no register parties going on. Do you know how many unregistered parties at fraternity houses I went to in college?
Yeah, and I'm not at all holding her to that discrepancy. I think that is, that can be very easily explained. But what about these 2 other women? I mean, do we just take Jackie's word that these 2 women really did report to her, at least, that they had also been gang raped at this fraternity?
No, I mean, no one's going to take anybody's word at this point in this particular story. I mean, as you were saying,
let's do a new story.
Now, the Washington Post articles continue to bring out all these so-called factual pieces that disprove Jackie, and yet they're not naming the lawyer for the fraternity. I'd like to know who this lawyer is who claims that there was no party that night, and what is the evidence for that? That they're saying it's a fact, but this is now again another reporter saying that his source said such and such.
This is a lot of responsibility to put on one journalist trying to tell a story.
It is.
What is the standard of journalistic integrity? When is it I'm just telling somebody's story, and when is there an obligation to go check out all of the facts and talk to everybody involved?
Typically, when you're talking about criminal activity, you do and should have a big responsibility to try your best to determine the truth of these types of things. I've had the fortune of doing a lot of crime storytelling myself, but I will say this: typically it's been from the standpoint of law enforcement. So I'm covering stories where law enforcement and prosecutors or DA's offices have tried and convicted criminals, and I'm using their data to tell my story.
And the case has already been proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
And you've got court records, and you've got law enforcement reports, and all the police reports and interrogations and stuff. Now, that said, do police lie?
Yes.
Do prosecutors lie?
Yes.
Okay. So, is it my job then to go interview everybody from that perpetrator's family to find out whether the police are telling the truth? I've never done that. Yeah. So it's there's all this shady ground, and then on that I would add every single day in America, if not the world, there are hundreds and hundreds of stories that are presented to us that have complete factual errors about them. Okay, we have whole networks that spend the whole day promoting misfact.
Right? I would love to say one, but I think I would better be served by keeping my mouth shut
about it, right? I mean, their journalists are not in hiding and not tweeting anymore because they've been told that they're not journalists. So you see what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, to me, it's sort of a slippery slope to say, oh, only in this case was it required. But everywhere else, no, it doesn't matter. And if you bring up Ferguson, you can say exactly the same thing. There's a witness right now that's been virtually discredited by a journalist. No one's talking about it. It's like
I saw one article about it.
It's like gone away already.
I just think the more serious the allegations are, and you kind of mentioned that. I mean, this is you know, you've got the victim's life, but you also got the life of 7 men, some of whom or all of whom may be innocent. I mean, you got to also take that into consideration. We don't know what happened, and you got to be really careful. I hold the journalist very responsible. I think when you're dealing with a situation like this, you've got to be really careful about what you say happened by whom. I mean, I think that's,
I agree.
You know, fair enough. Now, whether it's the fault of Jackie or Rolling Stone, how much damage does this do to true and legitimate victims out there? And Chelsea brought this up a bit ago, who now will be more reluctant to come forward. What do you think? Because you also have your Miss Revolutionaries experience. So
yeah, it does a lot of damage. I mean, it's already bad enough. And I think that, well, I will say this. The new wave of feminism is great because I think young women are really, they've had so much history and so much to learn from other feminists, and I think that they are starting to see the game that goes on. And in order to fight against it, they do have to be willing to stand up and make their voice be heard. I mean, you asked about the other 2 rape victims, if they exist. It would be fabulous if they'll come forward and be interviewed on a camera. Put your face out there and say, this is what happened to me. And that, you know, that would be the best thing, is for more and more women to come forward, not go back into the shadows, not go back. Because only in coming out and telling your story, as intimidating as others will try to be to you and make you say, you know, stop rocking the boat here.
Are you sure this really happened?
Yes. I mean, we still live in a misogynistic, you know, world, patriarchal world, and it's not just really? The Taliban that's promoting it. And so we have uphill battles to fight, and you know, I would say I'm going to reserve the right to give Jackie the benefit of the doubt. And say that when I've never been a victim of sexual assault, and so I don't know what that really feels like to go through that. But people who are experts in that field say that most women don't remember the details. So it isn't even surprising, frankly, if it wasn't even that fraternity house.
Right.
You know, when you're in college and you're 18 years old, and you know, when you're 18, I mean, I have a 17-year-old son, so your mind is really not completely all there all the time.
Right.
And you're into having fun. And you're into impressing boys because you really want to fall in love, and you really want to find a boyfriend, and you're willing to kind of play the games that boys tell girls they have to play. There's drugs, there's alcohol, there's a lot of factors that go into it.
Right.
It's still not her fault. If it happened, it's not her fault. It was the choice of the men to do what they did. It was their choice. And they perpetrated violence on another person. She didn't ask for it, assuming it happened.
Right. Yeah.
So I hope more women will come forward and talk.
And at this point, even Rolling Stone hasn't recanted the story. They've just come out and said, we apologize for not reaching out to the accused because we had an agreement.
No, but don't forget, they also said, we apologize for misplacing our trust
They
in
recanted
Jackie.
that part, and they
took that back.
And they said instead,
but you've already rung a bell. I don't care you took it back. It's already out there that you are throwing this woman under the bus. And what if she is telling the truth? Or I believe something did happen to her. So even that bit that has happened to her, you've essentially thrown her under the bus after writing 45 pages about her and her story.
You know, I'd like to add something important, I think, on this issue. In the old days, in the old journalism days, we didn't have all this immediacy, right? So there was time to let things happen. I think there's so much pressure on journalists to get stuff done quickly and get it out there. And then what happens with social media is, then it's like there's a jumping on the bandwagon of something. And all the comments, you know, all the comments that are allowed on articles and pages and stuff like that. And it creates this kind of like tornado of, you know, response. Yeah. And, you know, the Washington Post there then jumped on it. Oh, this is in our backyard, so we're going to go now cover this story. And what they chose to cover was discrediting the journalist, not looking at University of Virginia and their really bad record of not following through on these sexual assault complaints. No, not on that. No, let's discredit her. That's where they took their energy. Yeah. And, and because that's salacious and because that's ultimately they know what their male viewers want to hear, isn't it? Right. They want to hear that. They want to hear, wow, these girls, they lie about this stuff, don't they? Right. Actually, no, they don't. Do you know that only 2% of women who are raped actually fabricate or lie about what's happened to them?
This is a long debate. I don't know the statistics, so I'm not going to argue with the statistics. But from my experience, I have investigated women who are telling the truth, but I have also come across a lot of women and a lot of young girls in child molestation cases who absolutely have the motive and had the motive and fabricated based on that motive. I mean, there's a whole list, broken family, money, shakedown of a wealthy man, buyer's remorse, you go out with a guy, the guy just wants to sleep with you, you want to be his girlfriend, oh, he raped me. I mean, there's all of that as well. So, but absolutely there are, and I don't know the statistics, so I'm going to rely on yours. But one last thing on this topic. A blogger named Charles Johnson claims that he's outed Jackie by tweeting her real name. He gave her an ultimatum that if she were not going to come forward and tell the truth, that he would reveal her identity. And I think this is so disgusting.
It's very disgusting.
That he's bullying this woman. Yes, it's legal to give out a victim's name, but it's not kosher. And here, I can't think of a reason why this would have any news value other than to hurt and harm her further. I don't see what the benefit is of revealing her true identity, if in fact that what he said is her identity. I'm not sure how much he knows about her. But so has Jackie been victimized by 7 men, a publication, and now this blogger? This is my last question.
I think so. I mean, once again, it just comes back to the shaming, which you find happening with white men primarily doing it. I mean, it seems like it. It's to put the blame on her once again. Yeah, I think it's horrible to out her. That just isn't done.
Well, I do believe if she had filed a police report, for instance, and there was an investigation going on of this offense, then from my perspective, yes, I totally believe in freedom of information. I think that once you make such serious allegations, we got to know who you are. We got to know whether you've made them before. Who are you? What's your background?
That should know.
The public and the defense attorneys. Okay, these are very serious. People have to register for the rest of their lives as sex offenders. They have to do a lot of time in prison. So I need to know who you are. I don't want to know you're Jackie. I need to know your real name. I need to investigate you.
Well, certainly, but here the attorneys investigating or trying to defend their clients should know. But do we all need to know?
Well, I believe in freedom of information, and I think that perhaps. I think that but that's my point. She did not make a police report, so I feel like there's less of a need for us to know who she really is, and it goes back to creating a safe environment for victims of sexual assault, and I think that far supersedes and trumps any freedom of information that we might have in knowing her true identity. Anyway, so it'll be interesting to see how this story unfolds in the weeks to come.
I think there's more to come.
Yeah, I do.
Hope so. I don't think that this journalist, based on what I can tell of her background, I don't think she's going to just disappear into the night and never answer these accusations.
She might just be on vacation for the holidays.
she has her career at stake also at this point.
Right.
And I think it will be really fascinating to see what she eventually has to say. And I hope that Jackie will out herself and come out and talk about it. I know I did see one really interesting thing that was on the University of Virginia Sexual Assault Coalition page, that one man who apparently is a member of the fraternity has hired a lawyer who represented a dozen or so victims, not victims, but perpetrators of sexual assault on campus before. And he was named. There was a name attached to it. So I think that...
The lawyer was named.
The lawyer and the college student, the client.
Okay.
So they asked, the question in this particular page was, why did this person hire this lawyer, and what is he worried about? Well, in time, some of these names will come out, and the police are investigating, and it's hard because what will be the evidence? There is no evidence. I mean, the fraternity was cleaned up after the party, and she didn't go, to the police, and there is no rape kit, and so it's really hard to prove.
It's he said, she said. And,
absolutely.
All right, so on the docket, the spotlight is on Floyd Mayweather, who about a week ago Sunday was speaking, or I should say meeting his rapper friend Earl Hayes on FaceTime. Very early morning hours, like 7:30 in the morning on a Sunday. And while they're talking, reportedly, Floyd tells Earl that, look, your wife, Stephanie Mosley, is cheating on you. She cheated on you with rapper Trey Songz. And this is just bad for your reputation, man. You got to leave her. Something along those lines. And the next thing that happens is Mayweather puts down the phone. There's 12 gunshots. He apparently goes into the bathroom. And
Earl Hayes, we should
what did I say?
Mayweather.
I'm sorry, Earl Hayes. Sorry. Earl Hayes goes into the bathroom and shoots and kills Stephanie Mosley. He then comes back to the FaceTime call and shoots himself. And this is while the police are trying to break into the apartment. So the issue here is does Mayweather, Chelsea, you and I have been talking about this, have any liability in the death of these two people?
Well, criminally, I think it would be a pretty slam dunk no.
I agree.
He had no intent. Civilly is where the conversation gets more interesting because it's conceivable, I don't know about very practical, but conceivable that the family, especially Stephanie, would file a wrongful death claim against him if a lawyer were to find a way to show that his conduct somehow caused her death. And I have read two accounts. One is that Earl called Mayweather to say goodbye, and the other that Mayweather
goodbye meaning
that he
was going to do this.
Yes.
Okay.
And that Mayweather tried to convince him out of it. And then the other account I've read is that Mayweather was the one that called Earl that morning to say, you got to leave her. If you don't leave her, you're weak. And that is apparently what inflamed him, incited him enough to where he went, grabbed a gun, and just killed her while she was taking a bath.
And isn't it, I mean, there's reports that Mayweather did not even know that she's home. So my problem is with imputing, liability to him. If he didn't even know that she's in close proximity, how could he be liable?
Yeah, we don't know these details. The LAPD did interview him, but has decided to keep the details confidential. So we don't know if he knew, although I don't think it's really unreasonable that he would know that this man's wife was home at 7, I believe it was a Monday morning.
Oh, it was.
So the only reason it seems more likely that he might have be facing a claim is because he is a deep pocket, and he doesn't hide it at all. His nickname is Money. His Instagram pictures are often of suitcases of money, or flaunting it. And so because our laws are so arguable, there's not fixed and we can decide here it's a yes or no. There could be a reasonable argument.
This brings me to the next question: is do you think he's responsible for the deaths, or would they be coming after him because they think he's responsible for the deaths, or frankly he's just the only man alive with a deep pocket?
Well, they could feel that he is responsible and that it's worth their fight to go after it because he has such
they can
a
at
deep
least
pocket.
Name him as a defendant in this lawsuit, right?
Yes.
It's okay. And Floyd Money Mayweather, he has a history of buying his way out of legal problems. So what do you think is the likelihood of him being able to buy his way out of this type of lawsuit?
Well, we should say that nothing has actually been filed, so we're really just having a fun discussion about whether it's legally
viable.
Exactly. So I think if there was a lawsuit, he would probably be better to settle it when it looks like such a tragic story, and the family has is obviously left with a tremendous loss. It looks very terrible that Mayweather has any involvement in it. I don't know if he thinks maybe his fans would turn on him if he didn't reach out and try and help these families or try to talk badly about the family to defend himself against the lawsuit. And so it might be better for him and his public image and for his fans to continue supporting him.
On the public image, the night that this happened, he went to a Clippers game. And this next night, he went to a Lakers game. That's how the LAPD knew that he's in town. And I'm just thinking, okay, how good of friends are you? Because I don't know that I can.
Yeah, the accounts that I read were that they were best friends. But how? I don't know. I'm gonna try not to judge somebody's grief, but it seems pretty outrageous that he would be seen. I mean, hours later. It's such a public place.
Yeah. All right, next on the docket, the multi-billion-dollar ride-sharing company, my favorite, Uber. The app says that it is evolving the way the world moves, and it is now sued by Los Angeles and San Francisco prosecutors for a slew of alleged misdeeds, including failing to comply with state regulation, as well as misrepresenting the background, the safety of his drivers and the background checks that it conducts. So is it the state that is trying to find a way to regulate because it is providing transportation to the public, or is it really to generate revenue because of Uber's popularity?
Well, I think Uber's ability to generate money is good for the state because then they pay taxes. So I don't know if that's the real reason. I think that there are some legitimate safety concerns on this, and when this company claims that it does really good background checks, and then it
says
turns
it
out
leads the industry. Right, I'm quoting,
and that is where they have said something that is not accurate, and so they are being held to account for it. So,
it's because I think they don't require fingerprints, and the fingerprinting is the one sure way you're going to know that this driver is this person. Otherwise, if you're just going by driver's license number, social security, and name and last known address, you're not really sure if the person that passed the background test is in fact the driver. So they are saying that they've got the industry's leading background checks, but they're not even doing fingerprints, right?
So they're not.
Okay.
But they are the industry. I mean,
they are for me. I
who's
take it
their
every
competition day. Exactly?
Well, Lyft.
I mean, if you look though at the way taxi services have gone for decades past, it has been seriously controlled. That's what medallions are all about, and buying them and being prepared to run a company like that. And then Uber sort of came in and sort of squashed the whole system by which all of that was done. So
and there actually reported incidents with that involve public safety. I think that's why the DA's offices in LA and San Francisco have gotten involved, because in San Francisco there were two incidents. One was a passenger was attacked in September with a hammer by an Uber driver, and it left him without an eye. And then the other time in San Francisco, someone was assaulted verbally and physically by the driver. And what Uber does, I mean, all they can do is just suspend the account of the driver. It's not like they
terminate it.
Yeah, terminate it, and that's it. In India, far away from our borders, a woman was raped a couple weeks ago by an Uber driver. Allegedly, of course. Well, I don't know. In India, you might just be on the hook the minute you're accused. But Chicago, someone was assaulted and a lawsuit was settled. And then there was a kidnapping here locally in West Hollywood back in the summer. So there have been issues with it. But the lawsuit claims, and I'm quoting, that Uber ignores any laws and regulations that get in the way of the company's rapid expansion into the market and aggressively fights any regulatory enforcement efforts. But Uber, to me, is a smartphone app. It's a technology platform, just like Airbnb, that connects a passenger with a driver, right? And so my question is, can it be ultimately responsible for passenger safety?
Well, that's the thing, is that they do time and time again say, we're an app, we're a technology platform, we're not a transportation company, we don't control these cars. They're not our cars. These are independent contractors, and they do that. But then in other public statements, they say, you know, we take the safety of our riders very seriously.
That's
well,
the problem.
now they're making it sound like they have some dominion and control over
That's the problem.
them.
It's when it works to their benefit, they are a broker, you know, intermediary, just connecting the passengers and the drivers. And then when it doesn't, you know, that because they also take 20% of the fare,
right?
And they regulate the fares. When it's downtime, they drop the fares. When it's peak time, they have surge fares. You know,
and they're obviously now starting to realize that they have some responsibility for safety because they're all charging us $1 extra now
to ensure the safety, right?
Which is kind of funny.
Right. I love Uber. I'm sober and I still take Uber to work. I get a lot done in the back seat, but I think they're acting like a manager of independent cabs. I think that's what's going on.
Without any of the regulation or responsibility
right, trying to
that
get
taxi
away.
cabs have.
Exactly.
And a company is going
been...
to try and do what they can to maximize profits. And to some extent, you can't blame them. But for others, when it comes to safety, I think they should be at least working with the authorities to prioritize that. Hopefully they're serious about that and it's just not pretty PR statements. But I don't know if, you know, anybody will ever be ultimately safe in any situation. After all, there are stories of assaults by cab drivers, so no system is
this is not perfect. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I think the spotlight is on them because they're the popular kid on the block, you know. And Lyft settled.
They also need. But they're also in their evading regulations are
totally
perhaps evading too many.
Right. The Public Utilities Commission regulates. You know, ride-sharing companies like Uber and Lyft ever since September 2013. No, they do, but they are shorthanded. They only have 26 or 25 investigators in the whole state, and they've been requesting data from Uber, and Uber is like, yeah, whatever. I mean, they're not complying, and that's the problem. And that's this lawsuit is trying to get the Public Utilities Commission to be a little more firm with enforcement and Uber to comply. Lyft had a similar warning by the DA's office, and they settled for $500,000 with a promise that they're not going to make misrepresentations about the quality of their background checks, and that they're going to prohibit their drivers from entering airports because near airports you have to pay certain fees. So they've made this promise and they've paid and they're out of the picture. And my last question on this is, shouldn't Uber just stop resisting local authorities and finally be a good kid and follow the rules? Because I think as this keeps going on, it's bad publicity in a way for Uber.
Yeah, but Uber has since the beginning faced problems from, you know, cab companies and the regulations, and they have to some extent been very successful in working around whatever is there. I mean, they're valued in the billions of dollars, and they're only, you know, 4 years old in the capacity that they're operating now. So on one hand, what they've been doing so far is working. Maybe at some point they'll begin to care about these complaints and try and work with authorities. But on the other hand, even though these stories are coming out, people are still loyal, mostly because of the convenience. So at the end of the day...
And the rates. See, my fear is that if they're heavily regulated, those rates are going to go up, and then it's like a taxi, except maybe they speak better English and it doesn't smell as bad. I mean... I don't know.
Perhaps. Maybe there's a happy medium where it's still reasonably cheap.
Right.
We're reasonably protected. The company makes money, the state makes tax revenue, and we can all...
And everybody's happy. Next on the docket, Mark Wahlberg's victim speaks out and forgives him. He says he was a young, reckless kid back then. It was a long time ago, and I've forgiven him. And by the way, he did not take my eye out. I already was blind before this assault ever occurred. He also says that he wants to see Wahlberg get a pardon from the governor of Massachusetts. So if the victim has forgiven him, shouldn't the state of Massachusetts also forgive him?
Not automatically. It's nice. I read that the victim doesn't know Wahlberg, so he never received an actual apology, but he's more forgiving him just in that he understands that this guy, Wahlberg, was a young kid who made a mistake. So it's nice of the victim to forgive him, but I don't think that's totally dispositive in all cases.
Right.
And so that factor by itself can't be the reason why Massachusetts takes this felony off of his record. But it certainly works in his favor.
Plus, there was a second victim here. There was Mr. Lamb, who was hit with a club and went unconscious. So it's not just Mr. Trin. You know, we were focused on Mr. Trin because we thought he went blind, and we thought that was the worst injury out of the whole incident. But I agree. I think it's up to political discretion to grant it, and it's not readily granted. We talked about this last week. And I think that the victim's position here will be taken into consideration, but it's definitely not dispositive. And what about the fact that the injuries that we thought this victim had are no longer the case? So how do you think that?
So the guy apparently lost his eye in Vietnam in the war, and not because of Wahlberg. And before we had believed. So I obviously, when somebody's considering whether they should pardon somebody, they're looking at the crime that was committed and how egregious what it was. And so that again works in Wahlberg's favor, that it was bad. Nobody denies that it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as we first thought that it was. So if it's a less violent crime, that probably helps. But again, because of the way that people are generally denied these pardons, so many people apply, hardly anybody is pardoned. The fact that it's ultimately up to the governors of these states, who are always concerned about their public image and what voters are going to think of them next go around. It's a huge uphill battle that these two things by themselves won't help Wahlberg overcome that struggle.
And last week we talked about it being unfair to grant a pardon to Wahlberg as a celebrity, and then with all the other people who've also made substantial rehabilitative efforts and turned their lives around and have been turned down for pardons. But the flip side to that is his celebrity status, and how that would send a message out that, hey, if you guys, if I could do it, you could do it. You know, you too can turn your life around.
Well, on the flip side, there's an argument to be made. Look, kids, if you mess up, it's going to follow you. So don't do it.
Exactly.
I mean, it's really great that he turned his life around.
That's what's been going on. Can we change that and make it, hey, I mean, look, I think we punish people for something they did wrong. And I think we should reward them and give them the opportunity to not have to carry this with them for the rest of their lives. You know, there are people who repeatedly offend and commit crimes, but there are certainly people that I've come across in my career who are really good people who make mistakes. They are addicted to drugs like Wahlberg was, or for whatever reason they do a horrible thing in their life, they learn from it and they become a better person because of it. And I think that it's kind of, I get that Wahlberg wants this off his record. I mean, his job is not contingent on getting rid of the felony, but I think at the same time, you know, it's the scarlet letter A on his chest.
Look, do we want to let felons, you know, be able to vote again, carry weapons, and all the rights restored? Maybe, but that's going to be a big state-by-state issue or a big national issue. I'm not sure that anybody cares enough to take it up. I think the other thing that could help is if the decision got taken out of the hands of somebody who is elected into office, because then they're very concerned about what the pardon says about their image and their stance on crime.
All right, last on our docket, Camille Cosby speaks out on behalf of her husband, and she takes standing by my man to a whole new level. In her very first public statement, she says that Bill Cosby is the nice, generous, kind, and funny man that we all know, and that the person that the media has depicted him to be in the past few weeks is not who he is. And interestingly, she compares Cosby to the perpetrators referenced in the Rolling Stone article that we discussed earlier. And she says, look what happened there. You know, they called these guys a bunch of rapists and it wasn't true. And the media is now attacking my husband. And the final thing that she says in her statement, which is very short, was very interesting to me. She says, look, it's bad to be a victim and be attacked, but who is the victim? So why, and Nanette, I'm interested to see your viewpoint on this. Why is Camille doing this? Of course, it's her husband. She's been married to him for 50 years. She loves him. But why is she doing this? Is she saying, hey, I need to go on with my life because you're just victimizing my husband and I?
Well, I mean, he's sent out a whole, army of people to stand by his side. The lawyer is making statements, the other relatives, his wife. I mean, and she has stood by his side the whole time. The allegations of assault that have been brought against him are not new. These are old. I mean, some of these were 15, 20 years ago, and the public knew about them then, and she stood by his side back then, too. She has a lot to lose by not standing by his side, and we can't know anything about their personal, experience, but we probably can surmise that she wasn't present when any of this happened.
Of course, yeah.
So, lots of women stay in relationships with men who are abusive, or who are criminals, or who do things, and they just don't sometimes want to accept the truth. Or maybe she does accept the truth, but she's just not willing to publicly tell people that she's accepted it.
Yeah, she's in a tough position. What truth is she supposed to know? She has a truth of the man that she has experienced for 50 years, and then these allegations, and that creates this ginormous cognitive dissonance in your mind, this confusion about which reality is true. And so she, for herself, has to find a way to reconcile what's going on for her own sanity.
Well, and I also think, like you said, she's been through this for so many years. They've been married for 50 years. Some of these allegations go back to 40 years. And I think that if I were her, I would be like, okay, we've already lived through this. This is now our twilight years to enjoy each other, to be, he's 77, so she's, I don't know how old she is, but she's probably close to his age. And it's like the media is now bringing this back, and it's almost like haunting her again at a time in her life where perhaps, Cosby may have been a player at some point. I don't think he's playing now. And I just think that, it's almost like she has to relive this.
Well, I think the media is being unfairly targeted in this. This isn't the media making up stories. The media is sharing stories of women who are coming forward. And she accused the media of not vetting these women. Are these women supposed to be vetted, or are their stories supposed to be vetted?
Well, she calls it a witch hunt. And she says it's a witch hunt against my husband. So this victimization of Bill Cosby, and possibly her, do you think that it will sway the public perception of Cosby in any way?
I think there are too many women.
Yeah.
I mean, if it were one, maybe even two, which is in the case of the Virginia story, is completely different. I mean, there's no way she can correlate those two stories. They have nothing to do with each other. And I think that, I think she's in denial. Or at least publicly she's in denial. We don't know what she is privately.
Does this remind you of Maria Shriver when Arnold Schwarzenegger was running for governor, and she stood by him and vouched for the man that he is, and then I'm sure she was blindsided like the rest of us to find out about the nanny and the baby.
Right.
So it's just that she didn't know.
It's the expected response. It's predictable. I mean, to me, it's predictable. But I also have to wonder, because, as lawyers, we don't let our clients speak under any circumstances. But when family, wife, colleague, whoever, the priest, want to support our client, we definitely take a close look at what's going to be said when we try to control how that's going to affect the image of our client. And so here I read this and I think, how much of this is really Camille talking versus, save my husband's ass legal team?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
And I will say that the thing that's fascinating about this story to me on a much bigger scale is just how much protection there is that goes on when there's so much wealth and so much fame involved. There were clearly a lot of people covering for Bill Cosby all along, including Camille, and his lawyers, and his managers, and his PR people. They were actually helping him.
And the National Enquirer.
They were helping him get the drugs that he wanted to get. People knew that this stuff was going on. In green rooms where he was, going to go and perform, in moments, these kinds of things were happening. So people just, closed their eyes to it. And once again, it's just about the whole system of perpetrating this thing that it's okay to be a sexual predator as long as you know, we just make the women understand that they can't complain about it.
Right, they need to keep silent, and it just continues. This brings me to another point. Yesterday, the DA's office made a statement that it has declined to file charges brought by Judy Huth, the Riverside woman who claimed that Cosby assaulted her at the Playboy Mansion in the 70s. They said that the charges or the allegations, I'm sorry, dated back to 40 years. The statute of limitations was 3 years at the time. It has long passed, and even back then it would have been a misdemeanor. So they, because the LAPD had said, look, we don't care how old the claims are, we're still going to investigate, we're still going to submit it for review by the DA's office. And here we have the first lawsuit out of these accusers, who was, I'm sorry, not the lawsuit, the first set of allegations that has gone for review to the DA's office and has been rejected for filing. I'm sure there's going to be more on the Bill Cosby sex scandal in the weeks to come, and we'll of course keep you updated. This brings us to the end of our final segment in 2014. I want to thank Nanette again for joining us today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And our studios will be undergoing plastic surgery during the holidays, but we will be back on January 14th. I thank you for joining us today, and please let's keep the dialogue going. Look us up on iTunes, YouTube, post your comments, feedback, and questions, and of course click like, and we'd love to hear from you. You can also reach us directly. I can be reached by email, sarah@azarilaw.com, or Twitter at azarilaw.
At Chelsea Galicia.
Miss Revo, Twitter.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. And happy holidays to all of you. Be safe, and we will see you right here next year on Justice is Served.
From producers Maria Menounos, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, Kevin Undergaro, and the entire BHL crew, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us at info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I'm your BHL announcer, Scipio. Instagram me at Planet Scipio. Thank you for tuning in.
The views expressed here are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.